the Detroit race riots.
Yes.
What's your name?
Burton Roth, and I'm 76 years old.
So how old were you during these riots?
I was 26.
All right. Where were you living at the time?
I was living with my wife Laura and Jeffrey, our son, on Myers Road, between 7 and 8 Mile Road on the west side of Detroit.
All right. So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Pittsburgh, and we moved to Detroit when I was 4 or 5 years old.
And you stayed there ever since?
Yes, we lived on the west side. I lived on Buena Vista, and then my family moved out to the northwest section, more northwest around Vassar Drive and Schaefer area. Leisure is the street. We moved, got married. I know I got married to my wife Laura in 1963. We moved to a duplex on Myers Road across from Presentation School.
All right. All right. So like during these riots, what was your profession? What was your job?
I was a special agent with the IRS Criminal Division as part of the Treasury Department, and I was a criminal investigator, and did criminal investigations of, at the time of the riots, I was assigned to a group working on organized crime gambling in the city of Detroit, and was on surveillances daily.
So when these riots happened, did this just affect the city of Detroit, or did it affect neighboring areas and suburbs?
It affected, yes, well, obviously it affected the city of Detroit. The suburbs were all scared. That was the aura of what was going on, and so people were afraid to go into the city. They normally would go there to work or do whatever they do, but they eventually did. You know, the riot busted out and lasted, I guess, a couple of days. I don't remember exactly how many days, but I know for, I guess, several days there were incidents still going on, and we had to go out on these surveillances, so we were in the city of Detroit at the time. So we did see a lot of destroyed buildings, a lot of police everywhere, people being arrested and so forth, and a lot of the properties that were destroyed. We saw that because we were in those areas.
So you did witness some of it.
Yes,
firsthand.
because
Some of it.
yeah, you know, the other thing is, because of the nature of our training and what we did, is we had to also protect the various government buildings and offices in the city at the time. We would check on them and so forth and so on while that was going on. But we also conducted our gambling casework and that sort of thing. And so we had a tremendous opportunity to see everything that was going on in the city of Detroit. And anyway, one thing I did see, and I made it a point to go see that. My uncle owned a business with, it was actually a family business that my father had started, and it was on Woodward Avenue in downtown Detroit. It's now the Midtown area. Well, maybe less than Midtown, more south, but anyway, it was in like a Damon Runyon type area. And the building was formerly a car dealership, Temple Motors. It was a big showroom and a auto repair facility and a lot. And they had a building, they sold merchandise to street peddlers and other businesses. Anyway, it was a very big building. And I went down there. I had an opportunity to go and see
Survey the
what
damage.
was going. Yeah. to see what that building was like. And that building it looked like it had been bombed. It was exploded. The whole front end of the building was just a shambles. And back to the part where the repair facility was, which is all brick and so forth and so on, that was just bricks were laying down, and there was maybe a back wall that was still standing. Everything else, partial side walls were up. It was a big building, and it looked like it was hit by a bomb, and it was looted because they wanted all that merchandise, yeah, as well. So anyway, we saw that. Saw a lot of the buildings were destroyed on some of the other streets in the city, even around the I would say the Dexter Davison area, and so forth. And there were policemen who were going out and still pulling people out of buildings and so forth, who were looting. Anyway, it was a participation. You see a lot of police, and they're in uniforms, and you see other people, and I thought, my remembrance is that probably a lot of those people who they were taking off the street and grabbing were not people who were there to loot or do anything else. They were people who lived in those neighborhoods, and were probably curious and just afraid as anybody else of what was going on. There were looters, there were troublemakers, but not all of the people were there to loot and make trouble. They lived there, that was their neighborhoods. And so, there is, I had empathy for those people, and because I think they were, the black people who lived there and other people were just as much victims of that riot as the white business owners or whatever, or the business owners, when I say blacks and whites. I'm sure some of the businesses were owned by black people as well.
So Detroit had like quite a racial divide at the time, it seemed.
There was always a racial divide, but it was always more like on a social basis. But the blacks had their neighborhoods that they had, and the whites, the whites moved to the suburbs, a lot of them, because of the blacks. So supposedly, I think a lot of it is because of the expressways that were built through the middle of Detroit. That's my opinion. That caused white people to move. I know with the Jewish population, and we pretty much move together in places, and the synagogues and all that stuff move, and we follow that. So, we moved from Myers Road to Oak Park. But we were newlyweds, and we bought a house in Oak Park. That's where we were. A lot of people moved out, and you do hear it was because of the riots, but it was also because of the expressways, which I believe occurred before the riots, and people were moving to Southfield, and I'm talking about the Jewish population, Oak Park, and whatever. And but the riots definitely, I would have to say, had a lot to do with people not moving. They were moving south, not moving south, the whites. They were moving north and east and west, but they weren't going to go back into the city. And another part was there was a lot of at least in the news, a lot of sniping going on. Where
so you were like sniping of like the people rioting?
Sniping of people on the street, policemen and so forth.
Wow.
There were snipers people were shooting at people on the ground. Now.
So were you scared? Were you scared of that? Were you like frightened by the riots?
Was I frightened?
Yeah,
I
were you
was
scared
26 or I don't know how old I was.
Yes, you were.
Was I frightened? I had a gun, but it didn't make any difference. I mean, you could get hit, but I didn't think about that
You didn't at all?
particularly.
Well, I mean,
No.
was your family scared though?
Yeah, we were worried. My wife Laura was afraid in the house because on Myers, we would see cars So if the cars were going fast, you know, we associated that's because of riots, but it
Yeah.
might not have been
I mean-
because of the riots. But when the riots started, there were a lot of cars going north on that street,
Yeah.
and there were lots of police all over.
Mhm.
Okay, and I know, and the streets we drove up and down and that sort of thing were like blocked off. And there were a lot of damages. There was 12th Street area in Detroit. That was, as I recall, that was looted, and there were stores there, jewelry stores and places like that. And 12th Street was a busy street, which was populated by business owners, and there was neighborhoods there. People lived there around that area. It was like a hub, and the Dexter area, but more so 12th Street. And there were a lot of sniping incidents there and shootings and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And so you don't feel safe in that environment. You feel like you're in some sort of a war zone.
Mhm.
It was definitely when I was out on the street in my cars and with my associates, other agents. We were all connected with radios, you know, two-way radios and
Yeah.
everything. And we were watching certain places where gambling was going on. Even the numbers racket in Detroit, which is there were two numbers groups. There was a black numbers group and there was a white numbers group controlled by organized crime people. And so those businesses were still being conducted, you know, where they bet numbers. It was against federal law to do that. And so anyway, so, you know, we would see in those areas that streets were blocked off, lots of burned out places, and lots of fire trucks and things like that.
Yeah. So you were talking about how your uncle's car dealership, like that store.
Yeah, it was
It was
totally
totally
destroyed.
destroyed. So that was like, so you knew people who were personally affected, obviously, but
Yeah,
you had to be personally affected in some way too, right? I
Right.
mean, it must have a
Well-
lasting memory. I mean, do you have a lasting memory of it?
I do.
Yeah. So I mean.
Yeah, I think about it, and I think about it, never wanting that to happen again. And I do think about there were, you know, when I say sides, I mean, you know, the white people and the black people.
So was this?
They both suffered a lot, and I think maybe there were instances with the whites who suffered a lot, but a lot of it happened in the black areas, you know. So whatever, and so I think there's a stigma with the black population from the standpoint of the whites, you know, always afraid of some sort of a riot or whatever. I think that contributed to whatever, the strength of the segregation. But today it's a lot different, and I think people are more accepting of each other and don't look as much at blacks and whites maybe don't aren't so uncomfortable or
Yeah.
whatever, and are more accepting and are maybe bend over backwards to get along and say, hey, you're just as equal as we are, and you've got feelings just like we have. You know, those people that were doing sniping and that sort of thing, those people were, you know, as far as I'm concerned, they deserved to be shot if someone sniped back at them, you know, or were defending themselves.
Yeah.
You know, that's really going overboard. You're taking away lives and things like that.
So part of the attacks, obviously, Detroit was segregated, but there must have had to been some sort of divide. And in a way, was it almost expected to happen, or did anyone really even think that something at this scale could have happened, where people would have, you know, rose up and rebelled?
I didn't expect it to happen, but there was a certain amount of resentment that you would feel when you go into someone else's neighborhood. You know, I'm sure the black people felt it in white neighborhoods as much as white people felt it in the black neighborhoods. But there was a feeling of that, being uncomfortable, you know, out of your racial element, so to speak.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
at the time, who was the mayor of Detroit?
Coleman Young.
All right, and what did Detroit really do after the riots to fix everything, or at least fix the damages? What happened?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it's still being fixed.
So you think Detroit never really 100% recovered?
Well, they're recovering now. I think that
But
obviously
back
recovered.
to where we were before.
Well, I think Coleman Young was mayor for many years, and I think that I don't think he did that much to recover it, but it is recovering. I mean, I know the present mayor has I think contributed a lot, and it says something that, you know, he's in. I believe that Detroit is predominantly black, and he was elected mayor, and he's obviously well liked, and there's a lot going on to promote equality,
Yeah.
so that people can have businesses in Detroit, and you know, Detroit is really moving forward now, and people are even moving back into Detroit who
Yeah.
had fled because of the riots or whatever, you know, and didn't want to live there.
So obviously you were talking about how businesses were looted and destroyed
Right.
during this. So how did this really affect businesses? Like, did they like leave town? Did they go somewhere else to find business, or did they stay after? Did they try to like rebuild?
Well, I don't think people who may have shopped in Detroit, you know, around, let's say, 7 Mile area, which was the Avenue of Fashion and all that sort of thing. I don't know that those businesses really went back in. I don't think they had the destruction that the others did, but there was a flight to the suburbs after that. No question about it.
So it did
And so
definitely
it affected-
cause like, a lot of people.
Yeah, it affected businesses. And a lot of those businesses on 12th Street where there was a lot of stores and places like that, and businesses like my uncle's and so forth, they moved out. They're not there that I know of. They didn't go back. Some of them never opened again. And, you know, the suburbs really started to
Fill up.
move, yeah, to
Like
fill
flight.
up with things. There may be
Yeah.
different types of businesses and that sort of thing.
So how did like the media kind of like react to this like at the time, like over the country? And
Well, they covered it like all the time, you know.
I mean, television was a thing at the time.
Yeah,
so
I
obviously
don't
covered
think
it.
they,
Did they cover it on television.
Yeah, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
I think today it would be covered maybe better.
Even
I don't
more.
remember them. Would they do stuff on the spot? I don't. Probably they did. You know, to the extent they could.
yeah, obviously. I mean.
Right.
Okay, so the current president of the United States at the time.
Yeah, it was Lyndon Johnson.
All right. So what year did you move out of Detroit, and why did you move out of Detroit?
We moved out of Detroit. What year, Laura?
67.
1967.
You left the same year.
We
Was-
built the house.
Yeah.
You built
Oh,
the
so the
house.
riots, did that affect why you moved, or
We had
were you
bought the
planning
house
on moving?
already.
We
Already.
bought it in 66.
So you were already planning on moving.
Yeah.
So
Right. We were living on Myers Road, which was our old neighborhood where we both grew up. Okay.
So
We
you were
both
living
grew
where
up
you
in
grew up?
Detroit. Yeah. And we got married and we lived on Myers Road in a duplex. And we got a house in Oak Park
wow.
where people were moving there.
Yeah, I've seen that house before.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have Sandy was.
Well, thank you for your time.
Okay.